Good deal. Can log on here. How's your spring break, everyone?
It's good.
You go anywhere?
Yeah, I went to New Mexico. I went skiing.
Yeah.
I went to Santa Fe.
Oh wow. You guys in the same place? Same state? They're both in New Mexico, right? Red River's New Mexico.
Yeah. I went to
That's Santa Fe. You know Santa Fe, don't you?
Yeah. But it's fun.
Sure.
Did you do anything?
Yeah, I went looking for Bigfoot.
Where'd you go look for him?
Where he lives. How you like that answer? Southeastern Oklahoma. I didn't look for Bigfoot. Well, if I would have seen him, I would have claimed I was down there looking for him. But I just like that part of the state, though. Mountains. Ouachita Mountain or Kiamichi Mountains.
Yeah.
Did a lot of hiking.
Is it like pretty hot down there, or is it like the rest of the
No, it's cooler actually. Yeah, it's higher elevation. At least where I was, you know.
Yeah.
The first night I got there, it was really chilly. Like, it got down in the 30s at night. And I don't think it got that cold here.
We had 3 inches of snow in Santa Fe overnight.
Well, okay, yeah, that's right. You guys were up at a real high. I was at like 1,500 feet.
Yeah.
You guys were like, yeah, but if you went skiing up on the mountain, then you went higher then, right?
Yeah.
How high is Santa Fe?
7,000 feet.
Yeah, enough to get your attention when you get there.
Yeah, it's not as bad as Winter Park. That was the first time I'd ever been up high in 6 years, and Winter Park is 21,000 feet.
Yeah, I was I've been to Winter Park, and that'll get your attention too.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it takes a couple days to kind of.
Where's the point where you need like an oxygen mask?
Close to 20,000 for some people. It depends on the person too.
If you have like asthma, you'll probably go more.
Or if you're older and have any like breathing issues, any incidents of emphysema.
Like they sell them at the gas station, oxygen bottles.
Yeah.
They sold them at Red River's only like big 12,000 feet. So,
yeah. Well, 12,000 is enough to get your.
Yeah,
I mean, 12,000's plenty. But if you, yeah, right. But like in an airplane, if you're going to fly above 10,000 feet or 11, you have to have a pressurized cabin or a mask. So anything above 10,000 it could cause normal, even healthy athletic people to pass out if they're not. What's that airport? Is in Quito in Peru? I think that's the highest elevation. Okay, there's one in South America I'm thinking about, and people get off the plane there and just keel over on the tarmac. Like
that must be quite a shock because
you come out of a pressurized cabin. You got in the plane in Miami, Florida, at sea level, and then you get out of the plane at whatever it's at, 27,000 feet or whatever, and you're just, it's like you're still flying. It's like you just jumped out of the plane all of a sudden, you know? The plane probably flew 35,000.
Yeah.
And then you're just like hanging there, and the people just like fall over. They have like medical staff like when planes come in from other lower altitude. Yeah. So when you drive to New Mexico or Colorado, you got some time to acclimate as you're going, because even go through Oklahoma, the Panhandle, you're just very, very slowly going up, up, up. You can't tell because it looks like it's flat as all get out, but you're going slowly upward, and then you get into Colorado, and then you start really, but still, it gives you time for your body. But if you fly to Colorado or fly to these up in the mountains to Vail or Telluride, or you get off the plane and it's going to hit you pretty hard. I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh, I have a German state question for you.
All right.
So, where was Baden? Because I've heard of Baden-Württemberg, but
Yeah.
I've never.
Um,
I found out about the Grand Duchy of Baden, and I think it was over on like the Rhine border area.
Yeah, it was, the kingdom was like this, not quite half, maybe a quarter or so.
Oh, so that bit there. Okay.
Yeah, this is Baden-Württemberg. There's a couple of these hyphenated states that were principalities like that, that had their own, there's like Sachsen-Anhalt and Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Schleswig-Holstein up in the very top.
Yeah.
There's one more.
The weird thing is on the map, it said it went all the way up to the bottom of the Netherlands because it went right past
Now
Strasbourg.
that could be. I just know the first time that I went to Germany, I was in this area. I was right in here, and the people who live there, I don't know if it's kind of a cultural pride thing, but they'll say, yeah, it's Baden-Württemberg, but we're Badish though. We're in Baden, So it's like saying, yeah, we're in the United States, but we're actually in Texas though. Like people might think about it that way. So like the other upper part, of Bavaria, people there are real quick to point out that you're actually in Franconia, which it was its own
Bavarians are like that. They're
region.
They're very state.
Yeah, the Bavarians in general are.
Yeah.
And then within that pride is this regionalized thing also, where the Franconians will say, well, yeah, you're in Bavaria, but actually you're in Franken or Franconia. Or they have a different dialect. They do have different clothing and like traditional customs and clothing. Their own beer, that's all their own style of making beer. I don't know, which is really the biggest cultural thing that they've accomplished, other than Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. Maybe that's not it. But yeah, that's Baden that I know. Now, whether it stretched up to Holland or not, that I don't know. But
it was the Grand Duchy of Baden.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Baden-Württemberg because
Right.
I'm a German railway nerd that way, and I was reading about the Grand Duchy of Baden State Railways, which I'd never heard of before, and I thought it was like some sort of something out of a German TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I remember one time this family. This was. I was stayed with them in the '80s, mid '80s. Then I was back in Germany going to college in like '87, and I went for Christmas. Went to their house, and we were walking. We were in a ski. There's some skiing in the Black Forest, and we were at a ski resort actually, but we were just eating in the restaurant there, and we were walking back to our car, and there was a marker just off the drive, and the marker was really old, and it was the marker between Baden and Württemberg. So this would have been further south from where I was, but it had been there. It was just
Would that have been like from the Holy Roman Empire or something?
No, I mean, it would have been when those were two separate,
Yeah.
monarchies and two separate. I don't know if they were principalities or.
Württemberg was two separate families.
Yes, well, two separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So still today, there are people who have these titles, though, like so-and-so von Baden, or so-and-so von Württemberg. So the families are still, that's not really their, well, yeah, that's like the house that they're from. Like their last name could be something different, maybe, but depends. But yeah, it's interesting. I kind of follow a little bit, not, but like the royalty, that's still the aristocracy, but they have no power at all, other than their financial power that they have, and they own a lot of land.
Somewhat substantial.
Yeah, it is somewhat substantial, but they don't have any political power or anything like that. And it's kind of interesting to hear. There are a couple of magazines in Germany. They're not tabloidy, but they have a section in the magazine always where they're following who went to, and here's the Grand Duchess of so and so. And these titles have really little to no meaning anymore, other than to the family. But anyone, I think I've said this before, but anyone who has the word fun, VON, in their name, that's their royalty or their family. They might not think about it at all, but we had a girl here who came from the school in Berlin we exchanged with, and she was here for a few weeks with her group, and her last name was Van Helden, which she knew she was a duchess, actually. That was her. But as she said, I never really think about it that much. People ask me about it every once in a while because people are interested to ask.
Yeah.
But in general, it's never, and they lived a very, I don't know, upper middle class life. There was no land allotment or anything like that for them.
Well, I think the Austrians have done that a lot better or worse, depending on your stance, because there's the guy who should be the current Habsburg Emperor of Austria is actually a parliament member.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know what year he passed away, but I'm sure he's gone now. But Otto von Habsburg, who...
Yeah, he died in 2011.
2011, okay.
Yeah.
But he and his daughter, oh my gosh, she has a Winfrieda, or one of these really old German names, von Habsburg. This is such a weird historical event, or a twist of history. But because of who he was able to travel into Hungary and throughout Germany and also he lived in Germany, actually. He lived on the south of Munich around this big lake that all the rich people live, including Leni Riefenstahl lived there till she died. She didn't live very far from him. And but they, as the CIA approached them, and now this is from him saying this,
yeah.
And then also in the larger documentary, the members of the State Department confirmed that yes, that's true. We approached Otto von Habsburg about, but what they did was they had he says his daughter had the idea, although he would have been the name behind it to kind of push it. They had this friendship, what they called it, border friendship celebration or something, cultural celebration, where they held it right on the Hungarian-Austrian border. And this is the beginning of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Like, this is what the Americans and what the West Germans were the West Germans were very invested in it. We were in it with intelligence and organization. But of course, he would have been in touch with the West German government. He would have been in touch with Austrian and Hungarian because of his ties to the whole empire. Well, they held this, and because a lot of East Germans would vacation in Hungary, so they intentionally just blanketed the areas where East Germans would have been at that certain time of the year. It was in the summer. With flyers to come to this thing, and people literally walking up to East Germans and calling them by name and saying, "Hey, Familia Schmidt, you should really be sure and go to this celebration." And they're like, "Do we know each other?" And of course they didn't, but the intelligence knew who they were.
Yeah.
They were just trying to push people there, and when they did, then those same people were there that encouraged them and gave out the flyers and said, "Hey, do you see that border guard over there? It looks like he's just not really paying attention. Like he's just going to let you cross over into Austria." And they would say things like that too. And so people started heading that way. And sure enough, they weren't checking any passports. They weren't looking. And the Hungarians, who were quite defiant, who could have ended up with the Soviets in their backyard. I mean,
Yeah.
but they took that risk, and they bet on Gorbachev not intervening. That was the big thing, and they gambled and won. And the Austrians then also, of course, went on this, and then those Germans went into Austria, but then headed right to West Germany, where they were given new passports, not new identities, but lots of money to get started, lots of help, place to live. Like there were all kinds of promises if you could get out of East Germany.
Sounds very Konrad Adenauer
Oh, it would.
administration.
Yes, yeah. That's Helmut Schmidt, Helmut Kohl, though. This is so it's only two chancellors before the one we have.
Well, we've had a chancellor for
16 years,
now.
and the one before that was 8. And gosh, I don't know if Helmut Kohl is. Last I heard, he was still alive in a nursing home, but completely unconscious. I think he's passed away now. But anyway, he was behind that. Reagan was behind it. I mean, George Bush Sr. was definitely involved in it. And Dietrich Genscher, who was the foreign minister in West Germany. Margaret Thatcher was, tangentially involved. And believe it or not, also Pope John Paul II was involved in it. But he was involved in a lot of. He was in everything related to the Cold War. That's for sure. He had a vested interest in making sure that all fell apart. But that's the beginning. So once those East Germans flooded into West Germany, and word got back to East Germany that, hey, the border's open. Hungary is letting people through. They started flooding into Hungary, not on vacation, like just driving, because you could freely drive down there. Well, then the East Germans shut off that border with Hungary, and or to get into Hungary, and which would have cut them off actually to the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia. Right.
Yeah.
I got to look at a map and think, but
the Czechs would have still been under that brutal regime.
Yeah,
They tried to rebel in the summer of '67, didn't they?
yes, yeah, and things had lightened up there a little bit too, but not like they had in Hungary though. Hungary was a pretty liberal.
And Poland was having its own way
Yes.
to everything.
And certainly John Paul II's
Yeah.
got his hands in that too. There's a really good book written by one of the Watergate reporters, Leonard Bernstein.
Maybe you could still?
No. Leonard Bernstein's a conductor or a composer. Woodward. No, Bernstein. Carl Bernstein wrote, along with a Italian reporter from a newspaper, and they wrote a book about John Paul II. And some of the stories of the intelligence stuff and the CIA stuff he was in, like it's cloak and dagger. It's old man cloak and dagger. Like it's just crazy how much. But he was so set on.
He looks like a British commando.
He does there. Yeah, that's just after he was ordained. So he's pretty young there, but still, he had the. Plus, at the time under Reagan, the CIA director was a devout Catholic, Opus Dei member, very Orthodox Catholic, and he quite frequently flew to Vatican City on the weekend to brief the Pope on what was going on, and he would fly back and be back at work on Monday. Huh?
Did he take the Concorde or something? That would have been hard to do with the 747.
I don't know how he did it. It was a frequent visit that he made, according to these reporters, that he would fly from DC to Rome, leave on a Friday and be back at work on Monday. Give a briefing, 2 or 3 hours. Of course, the Pope would brief him on what he had, because he had contacts, and he has diplomatic immunity too, technically as the head of the state of Vatican City. And but he had ears on the ground, people that were there that could communicate with him freely. And anyway, it's a fascinating how many people were involved in all that. And
I often wonder, was life in East Germany really as horrible as it is or isn't made out to be?
Well, it wasn't as bad as other East Bloc places. Like it wasn't as bad as Albania or Bulgaria. In fact, it was pretty nice in comparison. But after you got out of East Berlin And East Berlin wasn't that glamorous, really.
Yeah.
But it was, but again, it wasn't as glamorous as Prague, let's say, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That was pretty swanky, actually. Prague was pretty swanky. But once you got out of Prague or out of, Prague, I remember seeing people plowing their fields with a horse and a plow behind the horse. I mean, like, this would have been in the late 80s,
They still use steam locomotives.
Yeah, and they were still burning coal. They were still burning coal at the heat.
They still are actually in Albania.
Yeah, Albania was one of the most,
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it, not backwards, but far behind. But East Germany, but once you got outside of the bigger cities, especially out of Berlin, then it went back several decades, the way things were set up. And, but the way they surveilled people and the way they could terrorize you,
They knew everything.
they knew everything. They monitored everything. They had banks of recorders that recorded any phone call. It didn't take much. East Germans might have been more suspicious than other countries. It didn't take much to get you on a dossier on you. Yeah. There's a really good movie called that won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film called The Lives of Others, and it's really good. And it's about a playwright. It's based on a true story loosely. I've read the real story, and it's pretty close. But a playwright who there was just one line in one of his plays that one party member in the audience, someone high up in the secret police, interpreted as being anti-socialist, and that's all it took. And the next day, they have his entire apartment bugged, and are monitoring everything that goes on in the apartment. And and this guy was not guilty of that, but he became guilty of it once he was the victim of their, when he realized he was being, and the more he found out about other people that he worked with, people who had been blacklisted and, that couldn't write anymore. And they were not afraid to really threaten you, and they would carry it out too. Like it wasn't a veiled threat. Or
Putin was in the East German KGB, wasn't he?
He I mean, technically he worked in the embassy, but everyone who worked in the embassy was in the KGB. Yeah, he speaks fluent German. I've seen him. I was in Berlin one time when he was there visiting. What was not Merkel, but the previous. Oh, geez, can't think of his name now.
Is it Hans Zimmer? I want to say Hans Zimmer, but he'd be a good chance.
He'd be a good one, yeah. I can't think of his name now, but anyway, he was there. It was a state visit, and then I saw him on TV that night, and his German's perfect. Perfect, and I've heard his English is pretty good too. But
yeah, he doesn't like to speak English.
I've heard that
a lot.
But in his,
I watched the video last night of him having breakfast with Obama. Obviously, they don't eat the breakfast.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be interpreters the whole time.
Yeah, I've heard his English is pretty good, but when you're at that level, you have to be very careful. When you're a KGB agent, you can kind of, but if you're not really comfortable and completely fluent in the language, confidently fluent, you want, because one word you say might not quite be the right word to use, and next thing you know, you got a whole scandal or So, but anyway, he's been around a long time. He's been involved in other stuff, but he was served in East Berlin for a long time. But there were a lot of things like they could threaten. The main thing they would threaten you with was just like your kid wants to go to college, right? Thinks he has, or to university. Well, that's I can make that not happen. I can make sure that it doesn't happen. Or, you want to buy that new Trabant station wagon. Well,
You really
it
know.
it normally takes 6 years to get it, but I can make sure it takes you 20 before you get it, you know? Yeah, right. Or one of the other luxuries, this is true in the Soviet Union too, was to live in a big city was a big deal. Like the fact that you were able to live in, you know, Berlin or Leipzig or Dresden, but they could make sure that you got moved out to some podunk town, you know, that's just Soviet style housing, you know, looks like something from a Huxley novel or something. It's just, you know, just a sea of buildings that are identical to each other. But yeah, they could make that happen too. So it was and then they had this network of, so I see, I don't know how the other East Bloc countries, I'm assuming they did things similarly, but I don't think they were as paranoid as the East Germans. But the East Germans also had something the other countries didn't have. The East Germans had the West Germans who were constantly pulling at them. Like, so Poland didn't have some other Polish people living some other place that were but they had the West Germans right there, and they were in their face, you know, and they were constantly, there was this constant attempt to undermine what was happening. And even while these plans are being made to bring down East Germany and the Berlin Wall and all that, Helmut Kohl's meeting with whatever he was called, the Chancellor, Secretary General, or whatever of East Germany, meeting, recognizing East Germany as its own country. They did all that just to put his mind. It angered a lot of people that that the West Germans were doing that. But Helmut Kohl knew we have to do this to keep him appeased, and he'll be like softened by. So he won't be looking for any kind of underhanded stuff going on, because he thinks, oh, we're over that now. We're moving on. But truthfully, he already knew that he was already involved in, the West German chancellor was involved in undermining them even heavier than before. But like they had this network of, so the group was the Stasi was the main, Stasi stands or its acronym for State Security Police, basically. And they were usually, all of them were plainclothes, you know, so there were those people who like worked officially full time for the Stasi. But bigger than that, there was this huge network of informants that could have been your uncle, your dad, your teacher, your college professor, your good friend, your roommate. They were just normal people, and they paid them kind of on a contractual basis. Yeah. So if I said something in class that you felt was anti-socialist, you'd write up a report on me, and then that would be submitted to the Stasi. You'd get paid then for doing it. They would read it. It would go into my file, which may or may not be that big. It may be growing. I don't know. And if they felt it was a real threat, or that I meant it, or that I could do something about it, then, or they just wanted to, you know, make sure I didn't do anything, they would, you know, take me for a ride in their car or something, you know. But then after so this was so there were, you know, there were wives that were informing on their kids, or mothers on their kids, you know, and cousins against cousins, and because this is how wide the network was. And after the wall came down and they kind of got it, I mean, I don't know, after a few years, things kind of got settled down and things were going the right direction. There was a big debate then in the Bundestag about, should we allow former East German citizens to see their file that was kept on them. And the reason they even debated it was because they knew that there were wives who informed on their husbands, and brothers who, you know, on sisters, and best friends on best friend, you know, or supposedly best friends. And so they decided it was best to let people see that if they want to, with their ID, they could go down, the building you can go to is still there. You can still go do this. And you could see your file, and those files would include the name of the person who informed on you. And you would find out, well, that's why I didn't get that Lada or the Trabant that I wanted, or this is why I could never move from, you know, who knows where to Erfurt or something. but yeah, it was, and there were divorces based on that, and there were families that's so they felt the truth was the best thing to do instead of keeping it all because eventually it might leak out. So let's let everybody know. But yeah, that was a you could write a whole dissertation on that though, on that event.
You could see the pieces.
Senior thesis, definitely, yeah, but you could really expand it. It was they were afraid, but again, not to give them excuse, but they had more to be afraid of though, like because the West Germans were influencing them so much, and West Germans could come to East Germany and visit. East Germans couldn't go the same way, but so they were nervous about that and what kind of influence is coming in, and it was just paranoia, basically, all around. And they just finally, it just collapsed. Like there's so long you can keep that up for, but the West Germans really were nagging. I'm really at their heels all the time, and so they were. That's the reason they officially recognized East Germany as its own country, to kind of like have them relax a little bit, not be looking for stuff so much. Erich Honecker, that was the chancellor's name. Well, this is
Did Russia used to go into Poland, or is it?
Yes, all the way to almost the Russian border.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know Russia was that big.
Yeah, where they used to crown the Kaisers was in Königsberg, which is
In Poland,
way over towards Russia. Yeah, I think it was. I'm sure there's a historical reason for it, but I'm sure it also was to thumb their nose at the Russians, like under But yeah, Prussia was, it was quite a bit bigger towards the east,
Well, I know they must have like mistreated their army severely because I watched Hugh Jackson's film "They Shall Not Grow Old."
Yeah,
Their
yeah.
interviews with British soldiers about when they taught Prussian to Saxonian POWs.
Yeah.
And they hated the Prussians.
Yeah.
Because they said the Prussians were like animals or something.
Yeah.
They were just the rudest people ever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's still, it's like I was saying with people who say, "Oh, actually, I'm from Franken, not Bavaria." There's people who will talk about being Prussian, and of course, people who are Prussian are proud of it. The people who aren't Prussian think that they're crazy, and of course, a lot of those cultural things outside of just language have kind of faded away. But there's still cultural things like little things and dialect and food and I don't know. Like this town that I was in the last couple summers, not last summer, but 2 summers before that, was a Prussian town, but is in Bavaria, in northern Bavaria. So it was a little segment of Prussia that extended over into what's now Bavaria. But I say that it was Prussian. I don't know when it got returned to Bavaria, but in fact, the school was named after what would be the translation of that title? Markov would be like a like a count or I think count would be the best. The school that I was visiting and teaching at. Yeah, that's the best. I mean, maybe Duke, I don't know, but possibly. I think it might have been higher up, although I don't know. Earl's pretty, but there's a big castle there, good sized castle, and but the school was named after this guy. But so they had the Prussian eagle and their logo for the school, and other buildings older buildings you'd see the Prussian eagle. No, they didn't do that.
They still do that in Chile, though.
Yeah, Chile. I saw that on Mark Felton. Actually, that's one of the more interesting videos I've seen. But the Germans have been going to South America for a long time. Yeah, that's an odd helmet, isn't it?
Well, sorry for wasting.
I don't think it's wasted at all. I was going to talk about Gern or nicht Gern, but what time's the bell ring?
5 minutes. States. Maybe.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's all interesting to me, and that's something I didn't know anything about before I went to Germany in high school for the first time. And then I realized, like, oh, this one country is not even, it's like half the size of Texas, Germany is today. But regionally and culturally, it's extremely diverse, you know, because, and people have their own little, yeah, Alsace-Lorraine, or people who live in the Saar region, or people who live in the Ruhr region, or the Rhineland, or Baden, or Württemberg, or, right? I mean, it's just like all these, and even like up in the north, there's islands, barrier islands up there, and Malarkey, there's a saint from up there, the Frisian islands, or East Frisian, sometimes they're called islands. It's they have their own world up there too.
Like if you just like extend it by 600 miles in a circle, that's about the influence of it. I found.
Yeah, I'd say so. Influence, that's how you define that, but
Cultural influence.
yeah, culturally, yeah. We were just talking today about Marky and I about the Prussian. Gosh, I don't know if he was a general, or I think he might have been a general who came to unite, and George Washington knew him from.
He was a Prussian general.
He was a general, but they knew each other from somehow from. He met him through some academy or whatever that in England, or maybe what? Do what?
Sandhurst.
So they and so, and because they were fighting the Hessians, or the British were hiring these mercenaries. So he got this guy to come over to the Americas, or to the United States, and taught the soldiers how, and also really got them, the Continental Army, in shape. Like really got them like looking sharper, more uniforms, and more disciplined. Although, or Washington was apparently was willing to kind of go with a more militia type, Minuteman, which made, but he really turned him into an army though. It's Steuben, I think was his last name.
It's
von Steuben. Yeah, because there's a town in Ohio called Steubenville, named after him. But that's actually a really important part of history, that they knew each other, and that he knew how to fight the Hessians. He knew their strategy, and so they had to, and it wasn't the kind of, I don't know what the difference was, but
I wonder if he organized, because they crossed the Delaware to get to the town that was full of the Hessians.
Right. Right.
I wonder if he was behind that because he knew the Hessians would be partying for 2 days.
Now the Hessians drink a lot, so
you
have a chance. Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not sure how long he stayed for.
I think it was only 2 years.
Yeah, so that wouldn't even been the extent of the. I don't know if he would have stayed till the end of the war, but yeah, he just anyway. So that's a Prussian influence there on us. Otherwise, who knows how the war would have gone. The British had their hands on a lot of things. They had to hire, when you're hiring mercenaries, you've got bigger fish to fry other places. This thing in the Americas was like not their biggest thing going on.
They had the Peninsular War at that time.
Yeah.
He was just finishing up kicking the British out of Spain after they kicked the Spanish out of Spain, after the Spanish kicked the Moors out of Spain.
Yeah, so this idea of fighting for the Americas, they didn't get their full effort.
No, they were also conquering India. They were technically conquering India. The biggest company in history was conquering India with its private army. It was registered in the UK. But
yeah, that's been done before. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I hope people at home got a good history lesson here today. It's the best I and Mark Felton have to offer. Wait and Cullen checked in. Thank you, guys.